the man who learned to live with silence. Before Alexandra Grant entered his life, Keanu Reeves was already known to the world as many things. A movie star, an action legend, a man of mystery, the internet's favorite humble celebrity. But behind the fame, the red carpets and the quiet smile, there was another Keanu, a man who had spent much of his life carrying loss in silence. For decades, Keanu Reeves became famous not only because of his performances, but because people sensed something different about him. There was a sadness in his eyes, a gentleness in the way he moved through the world, and a distance, as if part of him had learned long ago not to ask for too much from life. His childhood was unstable. His father left when he was young. He moved often. He struggled with dyslexia. He never seemed rooted in one place for very long. And perhaps because of that, Keanu developed a habit that would define him for years. He learned to keep going without asking anyone to notice how much it hurt. As his career exploded in films like Speed, Point Break, and later The Matrix, the world saw success. But success doesn't erase sorrow. Sometimes it only teaches you how to hide it better. And Keanu knew grief in a way most people never truly understand. In the late 1990s, he was in a relationship with actress and assistant Jennifer Syme. The two shared something deeply personal, deeply private. They were expecting a child together. But tragedy struck before that future could begin. Their baby Ava was stillborn. It was a loss so devastating that it changed everything. Not long after, Keanu and Jennifer separated. And then in 2001, Jennifer died in a car accident. In the space of a few years, Keanu had lost both a child and someone he had loved. No press headline could capture what that does to a human heart. He didn't speak much about it. That was his way. He kept moving. He kept working. He kept surviving. Years passed. His fame grew even bigger. But emotionally, Keanu seemed like a man who had made peace with solitude. Not because he didn't feel deeply, but because feeling deeply had cost him too much. People often described him as kind, quiet, respectful. He gave up seats on subways. He spoke gently to strangers. He donated millions without seeking credit. He lived more simply than most stars of his level. And over time, the world began to love him for his humility. But admiration is not the same thing as intimacy. And kindness is not proof that someone is not lonely. There was a long stretch of Keanu's life where it seemed as if he had accepted the idea that love might not return to him in the way he once hoped. Not because he had no heart left to give, but because some heartbreaks don't make you stop believing in love. They make you afraid to trust it when it appears again. For years, Keanu Reeves remained one of Hollywood's most private men. He did interviews, but rarely about his inner life. He joked promoted films, smiled politely. Yet the deeper story stayed locked away. And maybe that was because silence had become familiar. Safe even. Then quietly, without scandal, without spectacle, without a Hollywood-style announcement, someone entered his world. Not with noise, not with pressure, not with performance, but with understanding. Her name was Alexandra Grant. And what made their story different was that it didn't begin like a fairy tale. It began like something more real. With conversation, with art, with friendship, with trust, and for a man who had spent decades learning how to live with silence. That may have been the beginning of everything. The woman who did chase the star but saw the man. Alexandra Grant was never the kind of woman to orbit fame for its own sake. She was an artist, a thinker, a creator with her own identity, her own voice, her own world. She wasn't stepping into Keanu Reeves, life as someone looking for status. And perhaps that is exactly why their connection felt so different. Their relationship didn't start under flashing lights. It grew in a quieter way. Keanu and Alexandra first connected through creative collaboration. They worked together on books, including Ode to Happiness in 2011 and later Shadows. These were not ordinary celebrity projects thrown together for attention. They were intimate, reflective works, the kind of projects that require vulnerability, the kind that reveal how two minds see the world. That's often where real connection begins. Not in romance at first, but in recognition. Alexandra seemed to meet Keanu in a place beyond celebrity. She met him in thought, in expression, in stillness, in the emotional spaces most people never get close enough to reach. For a man like Keanu, that mattered. Because after years of being viewed as an icon, a meme, a mystery, to be truly seen as a human being may have been one of the rarest gifts of all. Their bond appeared to deepen over time. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily. And that steadiness is important. Hollywood often sells us the fantasy of explosive chemistry. Love at first sight, whirlwind romance, public declarations. But some of the deepest relationships are built differently. They are built slowly, carefully, like two people discovering they can breathe more easily in each other's presence. That's what many observers saw in Keanu and Alexandra. When they appeared together publicly, there was no sense of performance, no exaggerated display, no desperate attempt to prove something. Instead, there was ease, warmth, mutual respect. In 2019, when they appeared together on the red carpet at the LACMA Art Plus Film Gala, the internet erupted. But it wasn't because their relationship felt scandalous. It was because it felt unexpectedly genuine. People noticed the way he looked at her, the way she smiled with calm confidence, the way neither of them seemed interested in turning their relationship into a spectacle. For many fans, it was the first time in years that Keanu Reeves looked like a man who was not merely enduring life, but quietly sharing it with someone. And Alexandra was different from what many expected from a Hollywood partner. She was celebrated for being intellectual, mature, independent, and authentic. She didn't seem to shrink beside Keanu's fame, nor did she try to compete with it. She simply stood beside him as herself. That balance may have been exactly what made their connection work. She wasn't there to rescue him. Love does not erase grief. It does not rewrite the past. It cannot bring back what was lost. But sometimes, love arrives not to rescue us, but to remind us that even after pain, life can still feel warm again. And that may be what Alexandra brought into Keanu's life. Not replacement, not healing in the simplistic way people like to describe it, but presence, a calm, grounded presence, someone to laugh with, someone to create with, someone who understood the language of introspection, the value of privacy, the beauty of an unspoken moment. Fans began to notice subtle shifts in Keanu. He seemed lighter, still private, still reserved, but softer somehow. As though happiness, once feared, had become possible again. There is something deeply moving about seeing a person who has known profound loss slowly allow joy back into their life. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to be visible. And perhaps that's why so many people became emotionally invested in their story. Because Keanu Reeves had become, in the public imagination, a symbol of hidden pain. So when Alexandra Grant appeared beside him, she didn't just seem like a partner. To many, she seemed like hope. Hope that even those who have been broken by life can still find connection. Hope that maturity can be romantic. Hope that love doesn't have to be loud to be real. But with hope comes fear. Because when someone has lost so much, every beautiful thing can also feel fragile. And when a person has spent years protecting themselves from heartbreak, even happiness can be terrifying. So while the world saw a beautiful late-blooming love story, there may also have been something more complicated beneath the surface. Because to love again after grief is to risk everything again. There is a version of love the world likes to celebrate. It is glamorous, certainly photogenic, easy to post, easy to admire, easy to romanticize. But real love, especially after trauma, is rarely simple. For someone like Keanu Reeves, love may never have felt like a carefree thing. Not after everything he had endured. Not after the losses that had taught him how quickly life can change. Not after learning that joy can disappear without warning. So even as Alexandra Grant became one of the most meaningful people in his life, it is possible that their connection existed alongside an invisible tension. The tension between wanting love and fearing what love can cost. People who have been deeply hurt often don't stop loving. They become careful with it. Sometimes too careful. Sometimes they hold back, not because the feeling isn't real, but because the feeling is too real. That may have been part of Keanu's emotional world. To the public, he and Alexandra seemed deeply connected. And by all visible accounts, they shared something sincere. But private relationships carry private struggles. And not all struggles are dramatic enough to become headlines. Sometimes the hardest challenges are internal. How do you fully open your heart when your heart remembers loss? How do you trust peace when chaos once came without warning? How do you let someone love you when part of you still believes that nothing beautiful stays? These are the unspoken questions that can live inside even the happiest relationships. And if Keanu ever wrestled with them, he would not be alone. Many people who survive grief carry a kind of emotional caution that others misread as distance. But distance is not always lack of love. Sometimes it is fear disguised as restraint. Alexandra, by all accounts, appeared to understand complexity. She didn't seem to force their relationship into the public eye. She didn't turn intimacy into performance. And perhaps that patience created room for Keanu to feel safe in ways he had not for years. Still, even safe love can awaken old pain. Because when someone truly matters, the possibility of losing them becomes real too. That is the paradox. Love gives life color, but it also gives us something to lose. And for a man whose life had already been marked by devastating loss, that emotional reality may have been impossible to ignore. Over time, fans and media projected many narratives onto Keanu and Alexandra. Some called them soulmates. Others described Alexandra as the woman who saved him. But real life is more human than those headlines. No one saves another person completely. And no relationship is made of magic alone. What matters is whether two people can meet each other honestly. With scars, with fears, with history. That is what made their story so compelling. Not perfection, but depth. And yet, depth comes with vulnerability. As public fascination around them increased, so did the pressure of being watched. Every appearance was analyzed. Every expression became a story. Every public moment was turned into evidence of some larger narrative. And that kind of attention can place weight on even the strongest bond. For two private people, that scrutiny may have felt unnatural. Because some loves grow best in quiet. And the world rarely knows how to leave quiet things alone. So if there were moments of emotional distance, hesitation, or silence between them, those moments would not necessarily mean the love wasn't real. In fact, sometimes silence appears because the love is real enough to be frightening. And maybe that is where the emotional heart of this story truly lies. Not in scandal, Not in betrayal, not in some sensational collapse, but in the fragile reality of what it means for a man who once lost everything. To love again, to love while remembering, to smile while still carrying grief, to let joy in, knowing joy has no guarantees. That kind of love is not weak. It is brave. But bravery does not cancel fear. And perhaps that is why, when Keanu eventually opened up, even briefly, his words carried so much weight, because they came from a man who had spent decades saying almost nothing at all. And when someone like that finally speaks from the heart, the world listens differently. For most of his life, Keanu Reeves has been a master of privacy. He is not known for grand confessions. He rarely explains himself. He does not invite the public deep into his emotional world. And perhaps that is why even his smallest honest moments feel enormous. One of the most talked about examples came when he gave a rare answer about happiness. An answer that many fans immediately connected to Alexandra Grant. When asked about the last moment of bliss, Keanu responded in a way that was simple, intimate, and unforgettable. He spoke about being with his honey. He described a moment in bed, smiling and laughing together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic in a rehearsed way. It was real. And that is what made it powerful. Because for a man whose public image had long been shaped by solitude, tragedy, and emotional mystery, to hear him describe something so soft, so human, so present, felt like a revelation. It wasn't just that he was in love. It was that he allowed the world to glimpse what love felt like inside his life. A quiet morning, a shared smile, laughter, warmth, the kind of happiness that doesn't need an audience. For many viewers, that moment said more than 1,000 dramatic declarations ever could. It suggested that Alexandra had brought something into Keanu's life that fame, money, and success never could. Peace. Real peace. Not the absence of pain, because grief doesn't vanish, but the presence of someone who makes life feel lighter despite it. And in that sense, the confession wasn't just about romance. It was about what it meant for Keanu Reeves to experience tenderness again. For someone who had lived through so much loss, even speaking that openly may have required courage. Because to name happiness is to admit it matters. And to admit it matters is to admit it can hurt if it's gone. That's what gave his words their emotional force. He wasn't speaking like a celebrity trying to create a viral moment. He was speaking like a man who had rediscovered something he once may have thought life had taken from him forever. Connection. And that is why people responded so strongly. Not because he said, "I love her" in some theatrical way, but because his face, his tone, and the simplicity of his words made it clear. This was real to him. She had brought love back into spaces that had known silence. She had reminded him that joy could still exist in ordinary moments. That intimacy could feel safe. That after years of endurance, life could contain softness too. And if there were fears, complications, or periods of distance behind the scenes, that only makes the confession more meaningful. Because love is not proven by perfection. It is proven by honesty. By the willingness to say, "This person changed something in me. This person brought light. This person mattered." In a culture addicted to spectacle, Keanu's quiet openness felt almost radical. No oversharing. No dramatic monologue. Just one deeply human truth. There was someone in his life who made him happy. Truly happy. And for fans who had watched him carry pain for so many years, that moment landed like a heartbreak and a healing at the same time. Because it reminded the world that even the strongest, quietest people still long for love. Still need closeness. Still cherish the rare person who makes life feel less lonely. And whether spoken directly or not, the message was unmistakable. Alexandra Grant was not just another chapter. She was the woman who arrived after the silence and made happiness feel possible again. Some love stories are remembered because they were loud. Others are remembered because they were lasting. But the ones that stay with us the longest are often the ones that arrive when hope seemed almost gone. That is why the story of Keanu Reeves and Alexandra Grant touches so many people. Not because it fits a perfect Hollywood formula, and not because the world was invited into every detail, but because it feels like a rare reminder that love can return even after life has done its worst. Keanu's story has never been just about fame. If anything, his fame has often felt secondary to the emotional mythology surrounding him. The idea of a man who kept walking through sorrow without asking for sympathy. People saw his kindness and sensed the pain beneath it. They admired his humility and wondered how much loneliness it concealed. And over time, many came to see him not simply as an actor, but as a symbol of quiet endurance. So when Alexandra entered the picture, her presence represented something larger than romance. She represented timing, healing, companionship, maturity, the possibility that life, even after immense loss, does not always end in emptiness. And maybe that is the real reason his confession mattered. Because it changed the emotional ending people had written for him. For years, the public imagined Keanu Reeves as the man who would always carry grief alone. The man too wounded to fully return to happiness. The man who belonged to sadness in some permanent way. But life is rarely that final. Sometimes, even after decades of silence, someone arrives who does not erase the sorrow, but sits beside it. Someone who does not demand that you become someone new, but gently reminds you that you are still alive. That may be what Alexandra was to Keanu. Not a fantasy, not a rescue, but a return. A return to warmth, to trust, to ordinary happiness, to the deeply human truth that no matter how much we have suffered, there remains within us a quiet hope of being understood. And perhaps that is what Keanu finally confessed. Not only that she made him happy, but that she reopened a door he had once closed in order to survive. The door to love. That confession, whether spoken in a single sentence or revealed through one honest smile, means something profound coming from a man like him. Because when someone who has known real grief says, in effect, "I found something beautiful again," it carries the weight of survival. It tells us that pain is not the whole story. That heartbreak is not always the final chapter. That even after losing so much, a person can still be surprised by tenderness. And maybe that is the lesson hidden inside this story. Love does not arrive on schedule. It does not always come when we are young, unscarred, and ready. Sometimes it comes after the worst years. After the funerals. After the loneliness. After we have stopped expecting anything at all. And when it does, it can feel less like fireworks and more like peace. For Keanu Reeves, that peace seemed to have a name. Alexandra Grant. Whether the world fully understands their bond or not. Whether every private struggle remains unknown. One thing is clear. She changed something in him. She brought warmth into a life long associated with silence. She reminded a deeply private man that happiness could still be spoken aloud. And in doing so, she gave the world one of the most moving truths of all. That even the most guarded hearts are still capable of love. So perhaps the story was never really about a celebrity confession. Perhaps it was about something much more universal. The idea that no matter how much time has passed, no matter how much has been lost, no matter how silent a life has become, Love can still find its way in. And when it does, even a man who spent decades saying almost nothing may finally be ready to admit, she was the love that brought life back to mine.